How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 5 here, sort of the second part of Christianity. We'll look at how Christianity became a world religion. I did look over everyone's gospel comparisons. Good job with that. I mean, one of the intentions of that assignment was to kind of start engaging with the primary sources here. That a lot of what we know about religions are, texts are very important to a lot of these religions, to many religions in general. Those texts can be both oral and written. So I do want, one thing I want as we're going through this class is to be familiar, sort of start working with primary sources, looking at how they're formed. I think the gospel is a good place to start because I think if you went to Sunday school or a Christian, a lot of these stories about Jesus you've probably heard in many ways, like his baptism, um, some of the miracles he performed, the whole sort of crucifixion, the passion of the Christ, if you will. Um, but I think it's important to kind of look at the text, like a lot of the times these stories are sort of pulled out of each gospel and kind of put together. But it's important to kind of look and see how each gospel, the compare and contrast. Yeah, there's similarities, similar events, similar things happen, but some of these sort of details I think are important to sort of be familiar with. The birth of Jesus. Not every gospel is the same story. And as I think people did a good job of seeing how the different gospel writers of the gospels approach different topics and included some things and left some things out. So yeah, good. That was a big intention. And also kind of get used to using primary sources to help support ideas, right? If you're going to say Mark said this about the birth of Jesus, like give some passages about that from the New Testament itself. So great. Yeah, I gave comments on that. Good job. This week we're continuing with our discussion of Catholicism, or not Catholicism, Christianity. Sorry, Catholic is right here on my notes. But and the big one is, right, we talked last week, we looked at how Christianity went from sort of small, sort of, I guess, minor religious belief in the Mediterranean, and then through the Byzantine Empire became a sort of imperial religion. And then there was an original split between sort of Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox. And this starts with another major branch of split within Christianity with this Protestantism, right? The root there being protests. A lot of people were upset with some of the sort of Catholic Church, particularly this act of indulgences, and there were a lot of other things, interpretations of the Bible, various things. So people broke away. Martin Luther's one of those. John Calvin, some of these early Henry VIII broke away, challenged the sort of authority of the Catholic Church, and started these new denominations of Protestantism. And Protestantism is a broad term, and as the lecture says, there's thousands of denominations, Protestant denominations, right? And they all are somewhat unique to themselves. Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist, Lutherans. All of these, I think Mormon would technically be another Protestant as well. We'll get into that a little bit later as a more sort of modern religion. And then talked about sort of one of the big key ideas of Protestantism is this idea of predestination, that that God has certain ideas that we're on this path there, but then this idea of free will as well, so I gave it a video about that debate, which is still ongoing. And then obviously in this age of expansion, then Protestant and Catholicism spread out, and I kind of showed where, and even Eastern Orthodox spread across Russia, Siberia. So kind of see how these different regions, how Catholicism became how Christianity became a world religion, and what parts of the world these different sort of branches of Christianity are in. So if you were never knew, if you're unfamiliar of some of the fundamental beliefs of Protestantism, again, one big one is return back to the Bible. The Bible is important. The Bible is the word, not so much what priests say or the Pope, right? That where does the authority come from? In Catholicism, right, there's a Pope, papal authority, cardinals, right? There's sort of a structural hierarchy. Protestantism, right, doesn't really lacks that in many ways. Each church, can be its own denomination. It doesn't even need to be interconnected with others. So Catholicism also has like saints, which feasts of different saints. You don't really get that with too many Protestants as well. Icons, sort of images of Jesus, are really big in Eastern Orthodox. So there are some distinctions there. But yeah, that's kind of how Christianity became a world religion. Um, yeah, and then uh, and so that's sort of summary of that. In this week, so the assignment this week is not really things on Christianity. We'll come back to that. There'll be a quiz in a couple of weeks where we'll cover this, go back to this material a little bit. But this week, I want you to pick your final project topics. Right? What? So this semester, you're going to write about some feature of religion, world religion. I'm very flexible on this. I don't want, whatever you're interested in, take this, like if there's something in any religion, I mean, it's very broad, which I think is a challenge. Like, what are you going to think about or write about? And maybe if there's parts of religions you are sort of unfamiliar with, that you learn about, that's fine. You can still change your topic as the semester goes on, but I want you to kind of already be thinking, already kind of be working, whatever this topic is now, and finding some resources for it. Again, if you end up changing your topic, that's fine. You already have sort of the methods of how to find some resources, what you're looking for. So, pick any topic and then present the final project. There'll be a 3 to 5 page paper and a 10-minute sort of PowerPoint presentation with like five to 7 slides. That's due at the end of the semester. So, but there's gonna be different. You're gonna have drafts. So this is just like the first draft. There's sort of brainstorming section of it. So pick a topic. Write about like a paragraph of why you want to use this topic, and then try to identify 2 primary sources. And again, those can be written or oral or I mean, if it's like Christianity, right? If you're going to write about Jesus, obviously the Gospels, the New Testament would be an important one, right? So something like that. So. Or if you're picking a specific book from the Bible, the Old Testament or the New Testament, obviously that's your primary source there. And then one secondary source. What is somebody written about this topic and cite them with some sort of proper citation. Again, this one could be internet site, but over later I will want sort of more scholarly article or peer-reviewed article or a chapter from a book, something like that. But this, I just use this week to kind of brainstorm, be thinking about what you maybe want to write about, think about, expand on further. And I'll give you some feedback on those next week about my thoughts on your topic. So, and if you're undecided, send me an email. I can give you some guidance and advice this week as well. So great. That's it. Have a good rest of your week.